So for this unit, we're going to be learning about landscapes. And very similar to the vocabulary with cityscapes, a landscape is going to be a horizontal composition, and it primarily features land, hence the name. So with our cityscapes, it was a horizontal composition typically, and it was, of course, featuring cities. A landscape, again, we're primarily featuring land. However, I thought we'd go ahead and utilize landscapes as a bit of a study in not just landscapes, but in composition. So there's a few terms that I want to make sure we get a chance to go over. First one we're going to talk about is foreground, middle ground, and background. Foreground is the part of your composition that is the closest to the viewer. Middle ground, that part that's kind of right in the middle there. And then background is, again, just off in the distance. Now, I have a few little Bitmoji models here that are going to help me out here. As we've learned with our perspective drawing before, when things are closest to us, closer in the foreground, okay, think of like the word before. It comes before the rest of the picture, okay? The foreground is always going to be closer to you. The foreground, therefore, is going to look bigger. So if we have the exact same image in our middle ground, let's say, that image is going to look a little smaller. Whereas if we take the exact same image and place it in our background, then it's going to look really teeny tiny. That is that forced perspective that we've already come to know. Now we're just applying a little bit more vocabulary to it. Foreground, middle ground, background. Now this can change the weight of our composition as well. Come on, Bitmojis. This can change the weight of our composition. So for example, if I have something very large in my foreground and I have it right in the center, that's going to make a pretty symmetrically balanced picture. Even though the composition isn't perfectly symmetrical, we have an arm up here, we have a raised mountain over here, it's not perfectly symmetrical, but the overall weight of the composition is symmetrical. However, if I bring her over to the side again, like I had her before, now we definitely have an asymmetrically balanced picture. I have my focal point here in the foreground, asymmetrically balanced, because it's way over here and I have all this negative space over here. And this would be true even if we were working with a bit of a focal point in the background. So if I have my little Bitmoji way off here, she's kind of blurry and small way off in the background there, she still affects the weight of the overall balance in the composition. If I take her and I move her center, then again, I'm going to get a little bit more of a symmetrically balanced picture. See, even though it's not perfectly symmetrical, the fact that my subject is in the center, that gives me that symmetrical balance. But let's play around with changing a few more things here. Let's change the background and see how much that alters our composition. I'm going to keep my foreground and my middle ground here. But let's go ahead and change up our background a little bit and watch how much it changes our composition. Ready? Let's take our mountains out of here. There we go. Look at that. Completely alters the composition, doesn't it? Look at that. We have a completely different background here, but our middle ground and our foreground remained the same. Now, if I add my little Bitmoji here, look, we'll put her in here kind of selfie style. Now it almost gives kind of a reason why we're taking that picture. Like we have this really cool background there. But again, my vocabulary hasn't changed. Foreground, middle ground, background. Let's change that background up again and see what we get. There we go. Look at that. Now we have a completely different composition. So it's interesting to see how changing just a simple detail like the background can really alter your composition. Similar to with our cityscape compositions. Remember we talked about how a cityscape was a good opportunity to showcase the sky? A landscape can be similarly effective in showcasing the sky, but it is interesting to see how altering just the background in our composition really can change the whole mood of it. Again, like we could put our little Bitmoji lady in here. Look at that, putting her in the middle ground. Maybe we'll put her off to the side here, give us some asymmetry in the background. Just changing foreground, middle ground, or background, Or changing your placement of your subject to change the visual weight can really alter your composition. How about a pretty sunset? Let's put it up here. That looks pretty cool with that one. Okay, and again, completely different composition. So depending on what you have with your foreground, middle ground, or your background, and depending on where you place your subjects, if we have asymmetrically balanced pictures or we have symmetrically balanced pictures, we can see how just slight alterations in our composition can really have an interesting overall effect.